Look at the label on the shirt you're wearing right now. There's a very good chance it says 3 words. Made in Bangladesh. Last fiscal year, this one country, physically smaller than the state of Wisconsin, but packed with more than 170 million people, sold the world $39 billion worth of clothing. That is not China. That is the number 2 garment exporter on the entire planet. And it was built on the labor of roughly 4 million workers, most of them women, many earning about $100 a month. This is how Bangladesh quietly dressed the world. Let's start with the raw number, because it is genuinely hard to believe. In the fiscal year that ended in June 2025, Bangladesh exported $39.35 billion in ready-made garments. That was up almost 9% from the year before, and it happened despite a slowing global economy, political turmoil at home, and softening demand in the West. Now here's the part that reveals just how dependent this country is on one single industry. Those garments account for roughly 84% of everything Bangladesh sells abroad. Not 84% of its clothing exports, 84% of all exports, full stop. Almost every dollar the country earns from the outside world comes from stitching fabric together. The World Trade Organization ranks Bangladesh as the second largest apparel exporter on the planet, holding close to 7% of the entire global market. The only country ahead of it is China, an economy more than 50 times larger. And where do all these clothes go? Half of them, almost exactly 50%, sail to the European Union, nearly $20 billion worth. The United States takes another $7.5 billion. The United Kingdom, over $4 billion more. So the next time you pull a cheap t-shirt off a rack at a fast fashion store, an H&M, a Zara, a Primark, a Walmart, flip that label over. There's a strong chance it began its life in a factory outside Dhaka or the port city of Chittagong. And the industry is not standing still. While the old money came from basic knitwear, the t-shirts and the underwear the world buys by the billion, Bangladeshi factories have been climbing steadily into higher-value woven products like tailored trousers and jackets, and pushing hard into newer markets in Japan, Australia, and India to reduce their dependence on the West. Provisional figures suggest that in the 2025 calendar year, total garment exports could top $50 billion for the very first time in the country's history. From a standing start half a century ago, that is a staggering climb. To see how strange Bangladesh's position really is, put the world's apparel exporters side by side. China still towers over everyone, exporting well over $160 billion in clothing every year, roughly 30% of the entire global trade. But then comes the surprise. In second place, ahead of manufacturing giants and ahead of far richer nations, sits Bangladesh, with close to 7% of the world market. Just behind it is Vietnam, its fiercest rival, snapping at its heels. Then a steep drop to Germany, Italy, and India, each hovering around 3 to 4%. What this chart really shows is a two-horse race for the low-cost basics of global fashion. The plain tees, the jeans, the fleece hoodies, and Bangladesh has spent 40 years turning itself into one of those two horses. It did that not with rare resources or advanced technology, but with something much simpler and much harder to copy at scale. Millions of pairs of hands, willing to work for less than almost anywhere else on Earth. And notice who is not on this list. Not the United States, not Japan, not any wealthy nation, because at these prices, rich countries simply cannot compete. The entire bottom tier of the global fashion supply chain has migrated to a handful of low-wage Asian economies, and Bangladesh sits right at the top of that pyramid. When a Western brand needs 1 million identical t-shirts made cheaply and made fast, there are really only a few places on Earth that can do it, and this small delta nation is one of them. Here is what makes the whole thing remarkable. 50 years ago, this industry basically did not exist. In the 1970s, a newly independent Bangladesh was one of the poorest countries on Earth, an economy of rice paddies and jute, written off by outsiders as a hopeless case. The turning point came in 1978. A local entrepreneur named Neural Quota partnered with the South Korean conglomerate Daewoo and sent a group of around 130 Bangladeshi trainees to Korea to learn how a modern garment factory actually works. They came back, opened a company called Desh Garments, and the knowledge spread like wildfire as those trained workers left to start their own factories. Then global trade rules handed Bangladesh a gift. Under an old system of import quotas, the rich countries capped how much clothing giants like China and South Korea could ship them. So the big buyers went hunting for countries with room to spare, and Bangladesh, with almost no quota limits and endless cheap labor, was perfectly placed to catch that overflow. Orders came pouring in. Factories multiplied across Dhaka. A country that made almost no clothes in 1980 was, within 2 decades, stitching for the biggest brands in America and Europe. It was one of the fastest industrial takeoffs the modern world has ever seen, and it rewired an entire nation's economy around the sewing machine. The logic was brutally simple. Making clothes requires very little upfront machinery and very little skill compared to making cars or electronics, but it requires enormous amounts of labor. And labor was the one thing Bangladesh had in almost unlimited supply, at a price no richer country could match. So while economists debated grand development strategies, the country stumbled into the one industry perfectly suited to what it actually had: tens of millions of people who needed work. Clothing became the ladder out of the paddy field, and the whole nation started to climb it at once. Now let's talk about the people who actually do the work, because this is where the story turns human. Bangladesh's garment sector runs on roughly 4.4 million workers, spread across some 4,600 factories. And more than half of them, around 55%, are women. That single fact quietly reshaped Bangladeshi society. For millions of women, a factory job became the first paycheck they ever earned on their own, the first taste of financial independence, a reason to delay marriage and stay in school longer. Economists credit the garment boom with helping drive down birth rates and pull an entire generation of families out of extreme poverty. But there is a hard edge to this story, and we can't skip it. The legal minimum wage for a garment worker is about 12,500 dhaka a month. In US dollars, that is roughly $104 for a full month of labor. Labor advocates argue a genuine living wage would be closer to double that, and workers have repeatedly poured into the streets demanding more, sometimes met with force. This is the uncomfortable engine underneath your cheap clothing. The reason a t-shirt can cost you $5 is that the person who sewed it may earn less in a month than you'd spend on a single dinner out. Low wages are not a side effect of the Bangladeshi model. For a long time, they have been the entire competitive advantage, and that creates a genuine dilemma with no easy answer. Push wages up too fast, and the brands simply move their orders to Vietnam, Cambodia, or Ethiopia, taking the jobs with them. Keep wages down, and millions of workers stay trapped just above the poverty line, producing enormous wealth they never get to share. This is the tightrope Bangladesh has walked for decades, competing on being cheap while trying not to leave its own people behind. Every time the minimum wage is renegotiated, that tension explodes into the streets, and the government is caught between the workers it governs and the buyers it depends on. For years, the world barely thought about where its clothes came from, until the morning of April 24, 2013. On the outskirts of Dhaka stood an 8-story building called Rana Plaza, crammed with garment factories. The day before, workers had spotted deep cracks in the walls. They were ordered back inside anyway. That morning, the building collapsed. 1,134 people were killed, and thousands more were injured. One of the deadliest industrial disasters in human history. The rubble was full of labels from Western brands, and suddenly the true cost of cheap fashion was on front pages around the world. Rana Plaza became a turning point Bangladesh could not ignore. Under enormous global pressure, brands and unions signed binding safety agreements, the Accord and the Alliance, sending inspectors into thousands of factories to check structures, wiring, and fire exits. Thousands of unsafe workshops were fixed or shut down. And here is the genuinely surprising twist. Bangladesh, once shorthand for the deadliest factories on Earth, has since become home to more of the world's highest-rated green garment factories than any other country. hundreds of LEED-certified plants, including several ranked among the most environmentally advanced anywhere. It was a brutal, bloody lesson. But the industry that emerged is, at least on paper, far safer than the one that collapsed that day. Rana Plaza did something else, too. It forced ordinary shoppers in the West to confront a question they had spent decades avoiding. What is the real price of a $5 shirt, and who pays it? For a moment, the invisible people at the very start of the supply chain became visible. And while the outrage faded, as outrage always does, it left behind a permanent layer of scrutiny, inspections, audits, and watchdogs that simply did not exist before. The disaster that shamed the industry may also have been the thing that finally began to civilize it. So that brings us to right now, 2026, and the picture is suddenly full of storm clouds. The first is tariffs. Earlier this year, the United States slapped a punishing 37% tariff on Bangladeshi goods, a potential death sentence for an industry that sends billions of dollars of clothing to American shelves. After a scramble, that rate was temporarily cut to just 10% under an emergency trade measure. But that reprieve is set to expire on July 24, 2026, and nobody knows what comes next. Buyers hate uncertainty, and uncertainty is exactly what they have. The second threat is even bigger. Bangladesh is scheduled to graduate out of its status as a least developed country, which means it will begin losing the duty-free access to Europe that helped fuel its rise. The third is automation. As sewing and cutting slowly get automated, the cheap labor advantage that built this whole empire starts to erode. And underneath it all sits that dangerous 84%. When a country's entire export economy is bet on one product, a single bad year in fashion can shake the whole nation. Analysts now openly warn that Bangladesh has reached the limits of garment-led growth, and that to keep rising it must diversify into new industries, electronics, pharmaceuticals, technology, before the sewing machines slow down. Bangladesh dressed the world on the strength of 4 million pairs of hands. The trillion taka question is whether those same hands can build whatever comes next. One country, one industry, and a wardrobe that reaches into almost every closet on Earth. If you enjoy data stories like this one, subscribe to Asia by the Numbers.